The drones that attack targets on Iranian territory took off from hideouts within Iran itself. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's figure it out. And now, guess who made the following statement? Strikes on sleeping peaceful cities are absolutely unacceptable. What do you think? It was the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that made this statement and called for negotiations. See how that works out? It turns out that strikes on sleeping peaceful cities are unacceptable. Maybe you could stop striking sleeping peaceful cities in Ukraine every night then? Although, who am I even saying this to? So, do you remember Trump's plan to make a deal between the US and Iran? That nuclear deal, establishing peace in the Middle East. Let me just remind you that Trump's envoy to the Middle East is none other than his friend and golf partner, billionaire, Steve Witkoff. The very same one who, when meeting with Putin, bowed his head and, instead of actually dealing with Middle East issues, flew to see Putin and then told Tucker Carlson about how referendums were held in the occupied territories, how the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions supposedly made their choice there under the barrels of guns. Well, overall, it looks right now like a fairly large-scale military conflict could break out between Israel and Iran. Although I tend to think it will be more of a simulated act of revenge. If it does turn into a large-scale conflict, it will definitely destabilize the entire region. As for Trump and his so-called super deal, as they say, read Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. So, the super genius strategy of the art of the deal, making deals, leads to Ukraine striking at Russia's nuclear triad. Israel is striking at Iran's nuclear program, and this is despite the fact that Trump promised an excellent, wonderful, marvelous, magical deal with both Iran and Russia. Moreover, there's a truly interesting similarity not only in the fact that the same Iranian Shahid drones are flying both to Ukraine and to Israel, but also in that Israel set up a secret drone base on Iranian territory, and at the right moment the drones took off and struck their targets. A kind of Israeli web, so to speak. We'll get to that a bit later. There are a lot of interesting details there. And, well, in central Iran, Mossad agents not only place drones, but also missiles near anti-aircraft systems. The anti-aircraft systems were attacked. Special electronic warfare devices disabled part of Iran's air defense. All in all, a very, very interesting operation. We need to study this experience now, just like the Israelis do with theirs, and we know exactly who to use it against. Now, let's talk about what happened and why Putin should be stocking up on suitcases to the brim and digging his bunker deeper in the near future. You already know that a massive strike took place, so at least 3 generals have been eliminated, including the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the chief of the general staff, and, as of this moment, 6 leading nuclear physicists who were working on the nuclear program, and the head of Iran's nuclear program, Ali Shamkhani, has been seriously wounded. And if they say he's seriously wounded, that most likely means he's already dead. The leader of Iran jumped into a bunker, and the Ayatollah Dituhe immediately went down into the bunker. We also know who else acts like that. They gave the armed forces complete freedom to respond to the aggression. Of course, as if we would believe that. Iran immediately withdrew from further negotiations on the nuclear deal. Meanwhile, the US officially stated that they did not participate in the attack and did not provide assistance to Israel. However, they will defend together with their allies and shoot down anything that flies toward Israel. You know, sometimes I genuinely envy Israel that they have such allies who are ready to shoot down missiles, drones, and defend them. But I have always wished victory for Israel, because more than once high-ranking officials, political leaders, and spiritual leaders of Iran have declared that Israel has no right to exist, that they should be swept into the sea. Israel must be destroyed. As soon as a nuclear bomb appears, it will immediately be sent to Israel. But Israel did not wait around for that nuclear bomb to appear. And of course, the first to speak out were those who are always especially concerned, from whom, when you really need it, you can't get a word. I call them officials from the ring road with low social responsibility. So look, the Secretary General of the Organization of Concerned Nations, Antonio Guterres, condemned the escalation of military tensions and expressed particular concern that Israel's attack on Iranian nuclear facilities occurred during negotiations. See how things can turn out? Well, the head of the IAEA, Grossi, also made a statement saying that the fuel enrichment plant in Iran's Fordo was not damaged. And a little later, he also condemned Israel's strikes on Iran. Look at how things can happen. It happened right away, didn't it? I remember the visit of the IAEA delegation to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant when those swamp ghouls who both occupied the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant were leading the IAEA delegation around and saying, look, everything is under control here. Yes, we seized it. Well, what can you do? It's a nuclear facility, nothing to worry about. What can you do? And they showed the IAEA delegation a mine that had stuck in the asphalt and hadn't exploded. And they said, see how the so-called Kiev regime is shelling the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Do you see what they're doing? And then someone from the delegation looked at which direction it came from and how it was embedded and said, wait a second, the Ukrainian forces are on the other side, over there, but it came from this direction. How is that possible? To which one of the Russians replied, they have special mines like that. When they land, they somehow turn around 180 degrees. Nothing to worry about, right? Let's believe it. And Bloomberg came out with an interesting statement, which is now a recurring theme in many Western media outlets, saying that the Prime Minister of Israel defied Trump and made the decision to strike. And in fact, this is what the US and its allies were afraid of, because the deal, give us a deal, just give us a deal. The strikes were carried out just a few hours after Trump said that, well, an attack was not imminent, that the US would work things out there. Just wait, Trump will sort everything out now. And the attack is the main paragraph that is now being discussed in many Western media outlets. Israel's attack cast doubt on Trump's ability to influence even his own allies, let alone the leaders of adversarial countries like Russia or China. A bit later, we'll move on to what this means for Ukraine. There are some points that aren't very good for us, but there are also some quite positive ones. But what I became curious about is just how much Iran's nuclear program was actually damaged. So I gathered this information, and here's what I found. Iran has about 550 kilograms of enriched uranium, and the storage facilities have been partially damaged. That is, if the damage isn't too severe, it would take Iran about 12 months to restore these reserves. And by the way, some might even help with that. The whole centrifuges are used for enrichment. 2 out of 4 centrifuges are out of commission. So in this case, it would take between 18 and 24 months to restore them. And as for the scientists and managers, 6 have been killed, and most likely the head of the nuclear program as well. The knowledge remains, but the coordination system may be disrupted, so there could be problems here as well. Israel also struck at the development and storage sites of Iranian missiles. And this, by the way, is a good sign for us, because ballistic missiles are supplied from North Korea, but from Iran, most likely there won't be any in the near future. 1 out of 3 main test stands has been destroyed. Overall, it will also take about 1.5 years to restore things here. So the nuclear program hasn't been completely destroyed, but its critical components have been damaged. When it comes to modern centrifuges, outside assistance is absolutely necessary. And to set the program back for a very, very long time, to reset it, completely more strikes will be needed. And now, here's an interesting point. Where did Iran get more than 400 nuclear physicists, or at least specialists in this field? So who helped Iran? Who trained them? The Russian Federation, of course. In fact, there was an investigation revealing that, partially funded by the IAEA, Iranian nuclear physicists were sent to Russia, to Rosatom, where they acquired the crucial knowledge they needed. You really have to marvel at the audacity of the regime of those crazed ayatollahs actually creating nuclear physicists. Well, for Russia, obviously that's a plus, but no one else seemed to be concerned about it. But, friends, we must never forget that we have our own war. And today we have a very unusual gathering. Actually, it's not quite like that. It's not so different from the large gatherings we usually have. So, how did this gathering come about? In the morning, I see information in my FeedMe acquaintance. Vlada and her friend Nina are raising funds for electronic warfare equipment for Nina's uncle. His name is Sasha, and he's fighting in the 136th Separate Territorial Defense Battalion. Right now, they are on the Kupiansk front. By the way, he's been fighting since 2014, just for the record. And so Nina and Vlada, by my standards, are just young people. They post a video saying they're going to Kharkiv, and then further on to Kupiansk to film an interview and draw attention to this fundraiser for electronic warfare equipment. Because the unit and this Uncle Sasha, although he might be my age, maybe, well, he needs electronic warfare equipment. And it's not just that he needs it, it's absolutely vital, because last week his comrade was killed. And they decided, even though they don't have that many subscribers or that much reach, they decided to do everything possible to get this electronic warfare equipment. And they're going there, planning to record some interviews. I think they need help. This really touched me deeply, because this is what Ukraine is all about. This Uncle Sasha, he's fighting. He's on the front lines, defending Ukraine, defending his niece Nina, Vlada, and millions of Ukrainians. And his niece is doing everything she can to protect him, to make sure that he and his comrades have this essential electronic warfare equipment. That's why I think we can do a lot together. We've already proven that. Both large fundraising campaigns and medium-sized ones. But this one, it really touched me deeply, so let's support it. The link to the fundraiser is in the video description, and there's also a link in the comments. If you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code that takes you straight to a collection jar for this wrap. And in the description, you'll also find Revolut and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad, for which I am always especially grateful to you. I think we will make it happen. So, Iran has been dealt a painful, but not critical, blow. That is, no one intended to deliver a critical blow in the first place. They struck nuclear facilities, military sites, air defense systems, military leadership, and those who worked at these nuclear facilities and were developing nuclear weapons. So why did Iran's air defense system essentially fail? Well, there are 2 points that we need to study very, very carefully. First of all, Israel used a combined tactic. That is, there were decoys, bait drones that overloaded the radars, and new missiles. Here's a good question. Where do you get those? The ones that were flying at an altitude below 40 meters. And the second important point is that Iran's radar network had already been partially disabled by a series of cyber attacks and electronic strikes earlier this winter. In January, a series of strange incidents began to occur with Iran's air defense system. Well, and this is a signal. This is a signal to autocrats, to dictators. This is a signal first and foremost to Kim Jong-un. This is a signal to Lukashenko that you can buy S-300s, S-400s from Russia, even S-500s, if by chance they decide to sell them. But if you don't have such integrated communication with long-range radars and the command centers of all these air defense system points, then basically nothing will save you. A missile will come and wipe everything out. And now Iran faces a dilemma. How should they respond, right? They need to show their strength somehow, or we won't just let this go. And against the backdrop of Israel's statement that if you show your strength, then excuse us, we will wipe your oil infrastructure off the map completely to zero. In light of that statement, and with the air defense system blinded and partially destroyed, you really don't want to make such bold declarations, do you? That's why I predict I'm not Gordon, but I can make a guess, as they say that Iran will simulate some kind of massive attack on Israel, but it won't cause any serious damage. I really hope that there will be no casualties and that Israel will just wait it out in shelters. And then Iran will say, that's it. We've received satisfaction. We've avenged ourselves and so on. Because if they actually try to respond in any serious way, Israel really will wipe out their oil infrastructure first and then everything else as well. But like any autocratic regime, they might well harass Israel using the proxy groups Hezbollah and the Houthis, just as Putin also likes to act through others. So what does this mean for autocracies now? That is, the Kremlin has seen that with a sufficient amount of technology, you can neutralize even a fairly sophisticated air defense system. The S-500 won't guarantee you protection. A bit later, I'll explain how Mossad actually planted those backdoors in the system and activated them at the right moment. As for Kim Jong-un and Lukashenko, they can just sit tight and not make any sudden moves. Those Panzer systems that Putin gave to Kim Jong-un, well, he can look at them, roll them out at a parade in front of himself, and that's about it. And as for us, of course, we need to study this experience. I hope they'll share it with us. In practice is the most important point for us, the impact on the global economy and in general what this means for Ukraine. Unfortunately, there are some rather serious downsides. This is the price of oil. That is, any instability in the Middle East region means a rise in oil prices. Well, it has already started to rise. That is, the Brent has already crossed the 100 mark. What does an increase in oil prices mean? More revenue for the Russian Federation. What does an increase in oil prices mean? It means Europe must spend more to purchase energy resources. Where will they get more money? From the budget. So who will have less money as a result? Ukraine. This is absolutely clear. And of course, insurance rates have started to rise in the Strait of Hormuz. If Israel continues its operation and Iran starts striking infrastructure in the Persian Gulf, then the price could easily reach 130 and above. And that accordingly means money will be flowing to Putin like a river. And that's not very good. Of course, there are also some positives. The Iran-Russia-North Korea axis is revealing its weak link: outdated technologies, ineffective command, poor digital integration, and so on. Meanwhile, the US is getting a good opportunity. Right now, Trump has a good chance to make a deal the kind he likes from a position of strength. Like, look, we had no idea. Well, kind of aware, but also not really. Now, either you make a deal with us, or we won't control Israel at all. Right now, you're basically blind there without your air defense systems. You'll just be wiped out. Maybe that's why Israel didn't destroy the nuclear program entirely, of course, but did significantly mess up the timer. Because it really was a matter of days, weeks before Iran could produce nuclear weapons. And then now here's an important point. Why did people in the Kremlin buy up every suitcase in boutiques within a 5-kilometer radius after this strike? Because they realized what had happened to the Iranian air defense system. The Iranian air defense system, as I already mentioned, was partially disabled. And here's what happened in January. First, there was a series of incidents recorded which analysts later interpreted as serious interference by Israeli intelligence services. So there was a massive failure in the operation of military radars. This happened on January 12th. At several Iranian air defense bases, contact with radar installations was lost for 20 to 30 minutes. In other words, components of the S-300 system, among others, shut down, and no one understood what had actually happened. Then it got even more interesting. On January 14th, alarm systems were triggered in Tehran and its surroundings without any apparent reason. So what happened? The Iranian air defense systems were activated. They suddenly decided that missiles were incoming and started firing at false targets. Later, it became known that these were phantom objects. In other words, it was a fake signal, as if a missile was flying in. This signal is created by electronic warfare, and several batteries of the Iranian Bavar 373 air defense system stopped receiving data from their command posts. Suddenly, analysis showed that this protocol breach occurred through the introduction of malicious software. In other words, Mossad planted backdoors in the Iranian air defense system and then, when needed, activated them. There you have it. So the planting of these backdoors in January made it possible in June not just to bypass the air defense, but to deactivate and even blind entire sectors. They minimized the risk to their pilots and munitions. That's how it is. Greetings to the Russian air defense system, because it is built on a similar model. And this is important. The vulnerabilities that were discovered in Iran also apply to Russian air defense systems. So what can we take away from this, as they say? What can we get out of this situation for ourselves? Once again, I want to repeat that I sincerely support Israel and support these strikes. And of course, I would like Ukraine to have such allies as well. So the downsides: a shortage of Western weapons. If Israel requests additional systems or missiles for air defense from the US and EU, there will be less for us. An increase in oil prices. I've already mentioned this. A shift in the information agenda, a change in focus. Everything is clear here. If there's a serious war over there, no one remembers about Ukraine. And suddenly, just by chance, Putin recently offered his services as a mediator for talks with Iran. I think that now, since Trump likes deals, Putin might be in demand. Right now, I'm talking about not very pleasant scenarios. And the precedent isn't fixed. Now here come the pluses. That is the precedent of this unfixed nuclear threat. Israel has shown that a preemptive strike is possible without US approval. By the way, Ukraine demonstrated this even earlier. After all, we did strike at the nuclear triad, and that's why this strengthens our arguments primarily for the US and Germany that we need ATACMS and Taurus missiles against Russian Kinjals, Russian aviation, and so on. We've shown you, the web has shown that, of course, Putin will get angry, but he won't get his planes back. And in addition, we need to immediately put forward the agenda of a double war against drones and for double sanctions. I mean, we understand that Shaheds are flying at both us and Israel, and here we need to fight as tough as possible. Well, I think the US can already get fully involved in this case, go all out to fight against, first, these secondary supply channels for spare parts for Iranian drones to Russia. Naturally, this also hits the supply channel of drones to Russia. By the way, I mentioned that Iran started transporting these drone spare parts using completely civilian aviation. So there are passengers flying on the plane, and in the luggage compartment there are drone spare parts being transported. That's why, well, they probably thought, and most likely thought correctly, that no one, of course, only Russia, shoots down civilian planes. I'm talking about MH17, and not only that. So we keep an eye on how Israel is using new technologies and draw conclusions from that. Well, and the key for us to minimizing negative scenarios is to keep our allies focused on the European theater, showing that Ukraine's victory also reduces threats in the Middle East. And here, of course, Trump came out and said that the next strikes will be tougher, things will get worse if Tehran doesn't make a deal. Basically, you're all doomed. In short, Trump is now going to say, I'm such a genius, I planned all of this. Although that will stay with him,